Hey, my friends, it is time for another installment of Jed and the Junkyard War. When we last left everybody, there was craziness going on. The ship had crashed into the junkyard because of something, a piece of junk from a junk storm going through. The dreads came and they were trying to get everybody. The Captain Bog had a broken leg, so they found him and took him up to the ship. And remember, Spyglass, the face that was on the mast of the ship, was now finding legs to go onto his body. He was wanting Captain Bog tied to the mast of the ship, just like he had been. And Jed, Shay, and Sprocket had been hiding inside that school bus, but they were also found by the dreads and brought up to Spyglass. And Spyglass was not very fond of Sprocket and isn't probably going to be very nice to her. So this is getting scary, but we'll have to see what happens. So as I share the screen, you can read along if you'd like, or just sit back and listen as we read chapter 25. Spyglass grabbed Sprocket's arm and opened his mouth. His jaw unhinged itself, revealing every yellowed tooth in his gums. He clamped his teeth around Sprocket's arm and tightened his jaw. Her skin dimpled under the bite. She held her breath, and her eyes squeezed shut. Spyglass bit harder, savoring the moment. His jaws flexed, and Sprocket screamed. She tried to yank her arm away, but Spyglass's grip was too strong. As he bit harder, a familiar whistling sound cut through the air. The tail of one of the dreadnoughts exploded in a cloud of fire and smoke. Far away, silver dots appeared on the skyline. Falcons. Trails of violet smoke shot from their noses and headed for the ring of dreadnoughts. More explosions rattled the ships, and one dreadnought began to sink to the junk. The dread returned fire. Spyglass released Sprocket's arm, and the lens in his eye protruded, focusing on the wing of Falcons. "Bag these two and bring them to my ship. Tell the forward 3 vessels to engage the Falcons. Tell the rest to return to the fog." 3 dreadnoughts won't be enough to fight that flock, one of the dreads said. "They'll just get blown to bits." "Flea is right," another added. "We have more than enough dreadnoughts. We can win." "We got what we came for," Spyglass said. "We're not here to knock birds out of the sky." "What if the other ships refuse?" Spyglass grabbed Flig by the neck. "Then you tell them the order came directly from the galleon. We're to gather the cargo and leave." "What cargo? I never heard of any message." "That's because you're a worm. Now get it done." 3 dread grabbed Jed and stuffed him into a black sack. The material was stringy and felt like a tight, sticky web. A dread grabbed Jed's legs and pulled him to one of the cables. In unison, the circle of dreadnoughts flared their engines. All but 3 ships turned in retreat and began to accelerate. Jed rose into the air, passing the black shroud of smoke engulfing the ship. He landed on a metal floor. Hydraulics hissed as the bay doors closed, sealing him inside the heart of the dreadnought. Chapter 26. Orange light glowed around Jed. The dread who'd carried him into the ship hurried off. The sack around Jed's body was impossibly tight. He squirmed, but the sticky material barely stretched. He flexed his arms and neck. They wouldn't move more than a couple of inches. He tried his fingers. Nothing. And then the tip of his pinky grazed against something in his pocket. The can slicer. His lips curled into a web-squished grin. Bit by bit, he slid the tool up and out of his pocket. Once it was free, he pressed the round blade against the webbing and made sawing motions. A satisfying rip sounded in the quiet chamber. His heart beat faster. He continued sawing. Jed finished cutting away the sack and peeling off the sticky material. You're not a very sneaky mouse, are you?" a voice said behind him. "Shay, is that you?" The orange light pulsed and glowed against her face. "You're okay. How did you escape?" "You're not the only mouse with tricks." "Do you know where the others are?" He searched the empty floor. She hopped over clumps of junk. "Over here, silly." She pointed at another body. Jed sliced away the webbing. A foot tore free and kicked toward his face. He lurched backward. "Sprocket!" he half whispered, half shouted. "It's us!" Us? She asked, ripping off the rest of the webs. Golden Boy? Is that you? And Shay. How did you get free? Jed held up the can slicer. Right. Shay cleared her throat. We should go, yes? Before Scritchets come scritcheting around and find empty Scritchet sacks? Yes, Jed said. Where are the others? Where's the captain? In another scritchery, Shay said. How do you know? She examined each of his eyes. Weren't you watching? Watching what? When the Scritchleys heave-hoed him into the other scritchery. That one. She pointed up and to the left of where they stood. You can find him? Jed asked. Of course. She bounded to the far wall, then pushed against a panel. A door opened, spilling orange light into the room. How did you know that was there? Jed asked. She gave a disapproving scowl. You should learn to look better. The door swung open, revealing a dim corridor. Shay skipped through the opening. Jed and Sprocket followed tentatively. Slow down, Sprocket whispered. You're going to get us caught. Oh, yeah? Want to bet? 5 Battery says I can make it to the end of the hall without a single Scritchbug seeing me. Ready? Go. She turned and sprinted. Shay, stop! Sprocket whispered as loudly as a whisper could get. Get back here! Jed had never seen someone run so fast. Shay's thin body floated with each stride, though she made the motion look effortless as a morning jog. Shay, he whispered, wait for us. Shay wasn't at the end of the corridor. Shay, Jed said again. To his left, a thin shadow darted away. Stop! They ran after her, but whenever either of them got too close, she'd giggle and skip away. Each corridor was as black and undistinguishable as the last. Jed ran so fast the lefts and rights escaped his mind until they were deep inside the maze-like ship. The patter of Shay's footsteps disappeared. Shay, he whispered. No shadow, no sound. Where'd she go? Sprocket asked, sucking in labored breaths. Jed looked to the left, then to the right, where he spotted a tiny form crumpled on the floor. His heart thumped. Shay's arms were twisted awkwardly, her body limp, and her eyes closed. Sprocket rushed to her side. Shay, can you hear me? She touched her shoulder. Boo! Shay said, jumping up. Sprocket lurched back, and her hand jerked toward her shatterbox. Shay clapped her hands, then bit her bottom lip. Are you crazy? Sprocket snapped. Her shoulders relaxed. Shay nodded enthusiastically. Oh, yes, quite. Well, don't do that again, Sprocket said. Where do we go from here? Jed said. Shay pointed left. How do you know? Sprocket asked. She shrugged. Jed and Sprocket looked at each other. When they turned back to Shay, she was gone. Great, Sprocket mumbled. They ran in the direction she'd indicated, but before the end of the hallway, Sprocket grabbed Jed and pushed him against a wall. Shh! She held a finger to his lips. 3 shadows flickered on the corridor floor ahead. Sprocket shoved a shatterbox into Jed's hand. She then unstrapped the shatterlance from her back and pulled a lever into place. The shatterbox was heavier than Sprocket's finger spins made it look. How do I... Just pull the trigger. Okay, but what if I need to... Jed. She winked at him and patted his shoulder. Point and pull the trigger. Yeah. Sprocket smiled and stood. They stalked down the corridor, but the shadows were gone. Something snapped, and metal clanged against the iron deck. Jed's finger twitched, sliding against the trigger. Sprocket knocked his arm to the side. Watch where you're pointing that thing. She made a series of hand signals. Jed shrugged. What's that supposed to mean? Sprocket repeated the motions, and Jed shook his head. Another sound echoed through the hall. Metal smashed into metal. Something twisted and snapped. A group of struggling shadows flickered against the wall ahead. Shay! Jed called full volume. He ran ahead toward the movement. Shay, I'm coming! Shay popped out from around the corner, wide-eyed, and touched a finger to her lips. Shh! When you're trying to sneak around, you're not supposed to yell. Are you okay? Jed's voice bounced against the walls. We saw shadows, heard fighting. I thought someone was attacking you. They were attacking me, silly. Jed rounded the corner. The scattered remains of 3 dread lay strewn across the corridor. You did this? What was I supposed to do? They attacked me. A mix of relief and fear trickled through him. Who was she? Captain Bog could barely fight off a single dread. But how did you... Whoa, Sprocket said, catching up to them. What happened? Shay rolled her eyes. Come on, she waved them forward. Every Scritch probably heard you too. Not sneaky at all. Constantly full of surprises, that Shay. And this book. Chapter 27. 3 dreads scampered toward the noise, toward them. When they found the bodies, they scurried back the way they'd come. We can't let them sound an alarm, Jed said. Sprocket drew her shadowlance. A crack filled the air. 1 dread exploded, gears showering the deck. Sprocket cocked a lever, aimed, and fired again. Another dread burst into tinkling bits of metal. Jed raised his shatterbox and pulled the trigger. Blue particles skimmed past the ear of the 3rd. He fired twice more and hit the dread in the back. Shay shook her head. Not sneaky one bit. Sprocket swirled her finger through the lingering smoke in a signature. They'll probably send more than 3 next time. We need to find a place to hide, Jed said. We can't fight them all. Sprocket readied another battery in her Shadowlance's chamber. Speak for yourself. Shay crossed her arms. Yeah, speak for yourself. You can't leave us behind, Jed said to Shay. Then run faster. She spun and sprinted through the corridors, weaving left and right with seemingly no direction in mind. She's going to get us all killed, Sprocket said through gritted teeth. Around the next corner, a red light pulsed above them, and a foghorn blared with a grinding screech. They found the bodies, Jed said. Sprocket shrugged. What was left of them, at least. Up ahead, Shay jolted to a stop. Here, she pointed to a door. What is this? The most fun place to hide, she said, pushing it open. They entered a carpeted room with a leather sofa, a 4-poster bed, a carved oak desk, and a chest filled with cans and batteries. Jed pulled open the heavy window curtains. The sunlight stung his eyes. Is this the captain's quarters? He asked. Mm-hmm. Shay, how did you know this was here? A chill ran up his back. I've been on lots of ships. They're all the same. She plopped onto the sofa. Yep, best place to hide. Hiding in the captain's quarters? You're not serious, Sprocket said. Oh, I'm very serious. The plush bed sheets and pillows were unwrinkled, as if never used. I didn't picture Dread having rooms like these, even spyglass. Spyglass? That Scritch with the back and forth eye? No, silly, not that captain. The captain of all the Scritches. Captain Mouse King. Jed's stomach tightened. We're in the Mouse King's room? Sprocket looked from Jed to Shay. Mouse King? What are you talking about? The King of the Dread, Jed said. Shay waved a hand. Oh, hush, hush. Mouse King has a fluffy room on every Scritchum boat, just in case he flies on one. How could you know that? Sprocket asked. Shay shrugged. Doesn't it sound like something he'd do? Sprocket gave Shay a dramatic shrug. How would I know? I've never met him. How do you even know the Dread have a king? Because he's a mean mouse. Tells me I'm a bad mouse. Bad mouse, Shay. Not a good mouse. Not ever a good mouse. I try and try and try and try and try to be a good mouse, but always bad mouse, Shay. Bad mouse. Sprocket gave Jed a wary glance. Aren't the Dread going to look in here for us? Jed asked. Shay nodded. Oh, definitely. In fact, they're coming right now. We should probably hide. They're what? Jed said. He and Sprocket stared at the door. Hobbled footsteps clattered lightly behind it. Under the bed, Sprocket whispered, shoving Shay to the floor. Jed dropped and scrambled as fast as his hands and knees would allow. The door opened just as he tucked himself under the bed. Feet clomped into the room. 2 were spyglasses. 4 were not. The other 2 Dreads searched the room, opening cabinets and closets. If you don't find them before we reach the barge, Spyglass said to the Dread, I'll melt you both into doorstops. We'll find them, Captain, one of the Dreads said. Yes, you will. The 3 finished their search and left the room. Jed, Sprocket, and Shay waited for the sound of footsteps to disappear. Well, Shay said, now we know where we're going. What do you mean? Sprocket said. The barge. Those scritch knobs said we're going to the barge. What's the barge? Sprocket asked. Scritcherdom, where all the scritcher bugs are. Like another moving township? Jed asked. Oh no, not at all. It has wings like other townships, but it's bigger than mountains and mountains. Fly and fly for hours to reach the end. Hours? Sprocket said. You're telling me it's a sky town that takes hours to cross? No, I said hours and hours. And where is it? Where's that? The barge. You already know, silly. All mice do. You talk lots and lots about it. Sprocket shook her head. No, I don't. Of course you do. You just call it something else. Then what do I call it? The fog. Okay, I'm going to read one more because I want to know what's happening. Chapter 28. They took turns listening by the door, but Spyglass didn't return, and so they waited. Sprocket cleaned her shatterlance. Shay sat on the floor playing with a piece of lint, and Jed held the lemon. It was barely a lemon anymore. The rind was stiff and shriveled. Orange blotches stained the peel. Any hint of citrus was gone, replaced by the smell of pocket and decay. But it was his last connection to home, and he would keep it until he found his parents, or it withered away to nothing. Eventually, the light from the window outside dimmed. Black clouds stretched along the horizon. They didn't swirl like the funnel of a junk storm. They didn't shift with the winds or float or fall. They hovered, still like a wall at the edge of the world. The fog, Jed said. No one spoke as they slipped into its shadowy mass. Smoky particles danced along the window pane until the glass was as black as night. How do they know where they're going? Jed asked. They listen, Shay said, tilting her ear to the window, for the sound of engines and ovens and clinking and growling. Sprocket's brows were tight with apprehension, or fear, or both, but the look wasn't directed at the blackness or the smoke they'd entered. Her body shifted ever so slightly away from Shay's. First a shoulder, a foot, a small turn of a hip, and soon she was 2 steps away from her. Shay flattened her palm against the glass. Her gaze was fixed on the black windows. Clink, 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 whoosh, she whispered. Clink, 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 whoosh. With each whoosh, her eyes widened, then slowly returned to normal. For an hour, maybe longer, they watched. Nothing changed, nothing appeared. She stood transfixed by the black glass, quietly whispering. And then Jed heard something outside. Small at first, barely noticeable. Tap, 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 tap. He stepped to the window. What was it? Clink, 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 whoosh, Shay whispered. Jed froze. You've been here before, haven't you? Sprocket's hand hovered over a shatterbox at her knee. Shay? Jed asked again. Her eyes stayed fixed on the window. She let out a low, eerie growl. A deep moan coursed through the darkness. Shay growled a second time as if answering the moan. Jed's cheeks burned. Shay! She flinched and looked at him. What? What do you say? What did you say? What is going on? She looked at the floor as if trying to recall. I'm not sure. Have you been here before? Her face twisted. Think, she said to herself, slapping her forehead. The confusion strained from her eyes, and she looked up. Yes, I think I have. Here? Sprocket shouted. You've been here? To Dread territory? And you didn't tell us? What's going on, Shay? Sprocket's fingers tightened around the hilt of her shatterbox. Jed gave Sprocket a small head shake. Tell us what's going on, Shay, he said. You knew exactly where to go. where the Dread King's quarters were. How? How do you know this place? He motioned to the window. She chewed on her lip. I don't know. Her eyes squeezed shut. I can't remember all the things, only bits, little tiny bits. She pinched her fingers together to show how little. Think, Jed said. Her head shook, concentrating. I don't know. Jed, Sprocket said, pointing at the window. The black fog thinned as the dreadnought passed through the wall. A world of night stretched before them. Far below, tens of thousands of dreads swarmed. Ships floated around them in all directions, some as small as Bessie, some large enough to make the dreadnought feel like a rowboat. Warships lined the ground below in neat rows. That's not the ground, he said, leaning closer to the window. That's a ship's deck. Sprocket laughed. No, she said, that's impossible. He's right, Shay said. One big boat, the biggest. It's going to clean the junkyard, like a cleaning boat. Clean, clean, clean. Pick up all the junk, pick up all the people, until no more junk, no more people, all clean. Whenever Sprocket looked at Shay, her jaw tightened. Let's get the captain and get out of here, Sprocket said. That's him, Shay tapped on the glass, the Mouse King. Jed's heart jumped. He swiveled and searched the darkness outside. There, Shay pointed, behind that ugly boat. Wait, you'll see. A distant dreadnought drifted to the right, revealing a spot of striking red. Untarnished, in the center of the smog-stained world was a crimson boat. It was a three-masted sailing ship, like the kind Jed had read about in history and seen in movies about the Revolutionary War. It was like nothing in the junkyard. Long golden planks bowed around its surface like in a brick-like pattern, every plank matching its neighbor. The gold surface shimmered in the darkness like the dawning sun. 3 red sails billowed on each of the tall masts. My grandfather, you said they took him there. I have to find him. I have to get on that boat. What? Sprocket spun around and looked at Jed. You can't possibly have said what I just heard. I've been trying to find him since I got here. I don't expect you to understand. Good, because I don't. I'm not asking you to come. We'll get the captain and you off the ship. But I'm going there. Jed stabbed the window. All that will do is get yourself killed, Sprocket said. Jed didn't respond. He just stared at the red and gold shimmering in the darkness, thinking of how to get on board. Okay, so I was wondering if it wouldn't come back to a connection to his grandfather, because that's where Shay came from, his grandfather's boat, and had talked about the Big Mouse King that had taken his grandfather from the grandfather's boat. So the plot thickens and continues to thicken. So again, we are getting really close to the end, my friends. I hope you continue to enjoy this. I still can't wait to hear what happens more and to know that there's another book coming after that. So we will have to keep on reading. Talk to you again soon, friends. Bye-bye.